I do think that AI compresses the funnel from discovery, comparison, configuration can all happen much, much faster and maybe in one or two steps. Whereas today, those are, much more elongated, right? Because answer engines aren't, putting in a query and then hitting the filter and narrowing the results and, and all the sort of manual things that we do today. They're processing the information and doing that on the fly.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX-focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This podcast is sponsored by WorldPay. More about them later. Another really interesting topic today. We're drilling back into B2B, hot on the heels of doing an episode a few weeks back around overall B2B trends with Rupert Cross from 5874 Commerce. But really happy to have a highly respected thought leader in the industry join us today to talk about how B2B e-commerce businesses can take advantage of AI product discovery and agentic commerce. So getting beyond the hype into real practicalities of what this means and how things are shaping up in B2B. So warm welcome back to Bryan House, the CEO of Elastic Path.
Awesome, James. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Bryan was on, probably it was about 2 to 3 years ago, we did an episode centric to the tech stack around Elastic Path. Now we're coming to more broader strategy stuff. But before we get into the questions, do you want to give people who don't know you and don't know Elastic Path a bit of flavor for your journey to CEO and also where Elastic Path sits in the market?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I've been at Elastic Path for about 5 years, and I came in initially to run the product organization. I've been in the digital experience and the content and commerce space for a long time, probably too long. And so came in to run product and quickly took over customer success, and did some interesting things by putting customer success directly in our product management organization. What it allowed us to do was shorten that loop between our frontline individuals working with customers and our product teams, making our products better and helping us innovate more quickly, as well as delivering great service to customers. And so that actually worked out exceptionally well here. And then about a little over a year ago, I took over president and CEO of the company and sort of, really focusing us on how do we grow in our market. We've recently narrowed our focus down to B2B commerce use cases. I think this where the most interesting part of the market is right now, but more important for us is, our strength is in complex catalog scenarios. We have a really powerful tool, Product Experience Manager, built into Elastic Path Composable Commerce. And it's exceptionally well suited for mid-market B2B companies that have complex catalog challenges and sort of looking to automate workflows around those that have many, if not thousands of price books, lots of complex product scenarios, bundling, things where they need to do configurations and assemblies very easily. Our product's exceptionally well suited for that. So that's really where our focus is these days.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really interesting to see that. And I'm not surprised actually, because the growth in B2B commerce is huge at the moment. And also the US specifically seems to be a bit more advanced in terms of the way that B2B businesses think about commerce online. Not to say that the UK isn't doing anything, but I think we're probably a little bit behind in terms of embracing more modern tech around B2B journeys.
Yeah. And I think COVID, interestingly, was a big forcing function there. It's funny, when I joined the company 5 years ago, all of our pipeline was in B2C. And we were at the time spending a lot of time on an R&D effort on B2B. And I'm like, wait, the market's not right here yet. But, COVID sort of drove a lot of behavioral change in terms of how people want to buy. And so now I think the market's ready for the technology, increasingly ready. Maybe the US market's a little bit ahead of the UK market, but I'm sure it's coming on quickly.
Excellent. Right. To set a bit of context for all of those listening about the key topics we're going to talk about. So we're going to look at the shift from search-led buying to answer-led discovery. This is specific to B2B, by the way. We are going to be looking at the critical role of structured product data, practical playbook for brands preparing for 2026, and then a broader, Bryan's broader take on 2026 commerce predictions in B2B. So really interesting topics, so do stay tuned. What I want to start with, Bryan, is we talked about before recording this, is that there's a lot of noise about agentic commerce, AI discovery in the market. And amongst the really good information there, I think there's a certain conflation of what agentic commerce is. So I want to be really clear. I'm going to talk about where I think it is and then hear how you guys position it and how you're defining it from a B2B perspective. So agentic commerce, to me, is basically it's systems that can take autonomous actions to achieve goals, which could be buying a product, booking a ticket, whatever that action could be. And AI product discovery is linked to this, but isn't necessarily agentic, because AI product discovery can just be the use of AI platforms to help answer informations, retrieve product information without taking specific follow-on actions. It can just be an information request. And those AI product discovery tools like ChatGPTs, etc., using LLMs for doing this. So in my head, because I have these conversations all the time, is that answer-led discovery is a major component of agentic commerce. And the foundation is structured data, which is where my head's at. When you're talking to businesses and talking to the wider market, how are you defining agentic commerce?
It's an interesting question in that, we don't really, that's not really a term we use and certainly we market to, because I think to your point, its meaning is unclear and it's really, really big, right? And so I think organizations, running a product organization myself, you're always looking to crawl, walk, run. And how do I do make incremental investments and learn and then sort of build on those rather than sort of a big bang. And I think, a lot of people see this, we're going to have an autonomous shopping piece where I just, I put in all the clothing sizes and, the agent just buys clothing for me. I don't think that's in use by any sort of stretch of the imagination, sort of the majority of the market. And I think brands are, and B2B businesses are sort of skeptical of that today as a thing. But what we see a lot is a conversation a lot that we facilitate and have with prospects and customers is where the workflow places that we can automate using AI, right? And drive more efficiency. And so, answer-led discovery is a really important piece of that where, organizations are looking to say, how do I make sure, my products show up in the right way in the LLMs? So that way, because increasingly customers are searching there, right? And, particularly in a B2B context, there's a lot of like, how do I do a thing? Or, hey, I have this machine and this is broken. What are the parts that I need? Right. And you get a lot more, where keywords were driven by the fewer the words in the query, the better. Agentic prompting, you can have much more complex prompts in there to find directly the information you have. And now the question is, as a brand, you make sure your things show up there so that way the answer engine isn't confidently wrong with the wrong information, which is a problem we see all the time. So I think that is more the angle that we have taken as we talk about sort of the role of AI in commerce. And it's well suited to, the capabilities we deliver as part of our commerce platform. But it's also the other piece of that is workflow automation, right? One of the things with B2B is you need quote generation and you need workflow processes. And, typically better or worse, I've built plenty of BPM solutions in my career, and those are unnecessarily complex and, giant if-then tree statements of, how to run a workflow, process. And you spend all this time building products to support them. You build all this time building them. And then someone just picks up the phone and asks the question, right? And they go around them and avoid them and they don't really use them. And so I think there's an interesting piece from an AI automation that works the way people think, more along the lines of then these sort of structured sort of if-then statement, whiteboard sessions to, and how do we go from point A to point B with 27 steps that, people avoid at all costs?
Ready to grow your business online? With WorldPay Ecommerce, you can deliver fast, secure payments your customers love, backed by global reach and real people-powered support. Scale with confidence and enhance your customers' experience with WorldPay Ecommerce.
Yes, and if only humans were that predictable in their consistency of behavior as well when they're trying to answer questions or buy products. So if we look at the the shift from, as you're talking about, from I guess search-led buying, whereas I want to buy a product that is X, to which product is best for this specific business use case. And having just worked with a dental supplies company in the US, they have a set of products, and different types of dental service organizations buy different versions of products based on their use cases. So you've got all these nuances in B2B. And you've got, as you've already alluded to, you've got the growth in AI agents such as ChatGPT, Perplexity. And I know we'll talk more about your product and how you've evolved in that, the core platform level later. But they're starting to, off a small base, the volumes per day are going up exponentially. And that Q&A search is evolving out of traditional search engines like Google into these LLM-based models. So the big question really is, how ready do you think B2B brands are for this shift? What are you seeing out there? What status of maturity are people at? How are people thinking about this at the moment?
I'd say it's still early days, and I think that creates opportunities for brands that want to be innovative and create sort of new experiences to lock in customer loyalty and sort of build deeper relationships with customers. I think one of the biggest challenges in these areas around B2B is, because of the complexity you just described in that dental products use case, that's why you have salespeople, right? Salespeople help you navigate that complexity in there. And so does the change mean, is this AI sort of answer-led discovery sort of a superpower for your existing sales team? Is it a replacement for your existing sales team? What role does it play in the sort of evolution of your organization beyond your digital strategy? And I think, when I've seen sort of B2B digital commerce initiatives fail, it's usually that organizational resistance to change is the bigger dynamic rather than sort of a technical piece. But I think the other thing that we are starting to see, and this really comes out of discussion, is there are scenarios where it's, our product is our IP, so we don't want that out. It's not on search engines, and it's not necessarily going to be on answer engines. So we don't necessarily need AI. But then you start to think about what's a little bit deeper into the pre-sale experience and the post-sale experience. There's plenty of opportunity for AI automation. And through those discussions, people are like, oh, I hadn't thought of that, right? I'm thinking, just as we started with, AI in commerce means agentic commerce, an agent goes and buys all the things. And that isn't necessarily sort of a de facto correlation, right? It can be, oh no, actually, there's all this information we send with our products when someone buys it. Today we manually key all that in, why can't we automate that in the population of that and have an AI check, a quality check around that, right? That simplifies processes and accelerates things dramatically.
Yeah, the quote process is a really interesting one. I'd had a conversation with a couple of B2B consultants pre-Christmas about this is where I think AI is going to add so much value in B2B processes, because it can reduce the tying up of salespeople on questions that can be answered through automation and help them focus on more value-add tasks in that quote process to A, value add from the customer's point of view, but B, value add from the business and the closure point of view. So that ability for someone to use an agent to say, oh, actually, I need a product that can do A, B, and C. Which version of this product is right for X? And then say, oh, I'm not quite sure it does this. Does it do that? And that rely on the structured data that sits behind it in the catalog, but using the LLM and the AI capability to then generate the right answer in the right format. The value on that, to me, feels huge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I also think it sort of replaces in some ways sort of offloads the burden of knowledge, right? Like a good example is, for years if you wanted to be a taxi driver in London, you had to know, you were tested on your knowledge of the streets of the city, and London's an enormous city, right? That's a hard thing. Then Uber came along and GPS, I don't need to know that anymore. That's not valuable. And I think the same thing happens from a human understanding of complex product catalogs in B2B scenarios, right? Like, I don't need you to memorize the catalog per se and understand all the permutations. What I need you to do is build relationships and help move the transaction along. And so, I think AI assistance in here, particularly in complex product sets, is potentially enormous. It really gives selling organizations superpowers to do things much, much more easily and focus on the things where they add real value into, not generating the quote isn't where the valuable piece. It's actually building the relationship and the trust in the brand. So that way people can want to continue buying from your organization.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the things that some people are worried about is, well, actually, if AI is doing this, or what's the point of my sales team as well? Actually, you're right. It's the ability and time to have meaningful connections with people, whether that's phoning them up and saying, are you okay? Can I help you? Going for a meeting, take them out for a coffee, value add things like updating them on latest products or information, the things that make a difference to building long-term human relationships. If you don't have to do 6 hours of tedious admin every week on updating quotes and answering quote questions, but you can focus on that feels like a real nice value proposition between tech and people.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think this is has the potential to be an incredible sort of tech-enabled use case where sort of the transformation in the organization that this represents is not your sort of traditional digital transformation, while digital remains a part of it, but is actually much more about sort of organizational change and transformation in terms of how you engage with your customers. And look, people are busy. They want these things to be as frictionless as possible. And so I think the opportunity to remove friction while adding value at the same time, through the use of AI and digital commerce for B2B is enormous.
Yeah. And there's a lot been spoken about, over the last 12 months in B2C commerce about where this is headed in terms of shoppers using ChatGPT to find products, clothing, beauty, whatever it might be. And there's been some data release where people are showing, like from their analytics, they're seeing that it's now, from 0.5% to 1% of sessions coming into, etc. But I've seen less talk in B2B, and I know that you're predicting and seeing that actually the shift towards this sort of answer-led discovery is going to be even bigger in B2B. Do you want to give people like a bit of a walkthrough of why do you think it's going to be have a significant impact in B2B, and how is buyer behavior in B2B changing in relation to this?
Yeah, so I think what look, every company, whether they be B2B or B2C, is looking to identify and land new customers. And, I think one of the things that the opportunities that exists with, sort of answer-led discovery here is by structuring your product information so it's easily consumed and with the correct information by LLMs, you actually open yourself up to a set of market that maybe didn't know you existed, but have problems that you're well suited to solve, right? So which valve fits this pneumatic, system that I have, or what SKU replaces this discontinued part of my assembly. Those are the, the types of prompts that are much better articulations of the problem an individual has, can introduce you to identify and find new customers. Like, hey, I didn't know that brand sold, I never heard of this company that has a solution to my problem, or I didn't know that, and build a relationship that way. And, I think the other piece is, there's opportunity given sort of the, with repeat customers is how do you, I think there's a real opportunity to accelerate sort of repurchases and sort of ongoing sort of replenishment and elements here, based on sort of standard orders and, sort of applying AI can sort of apply subscription type principles and sort of behaviors into sort of the reorder process. So that way, in the same way we talk about AI for predictive maintenance, it's also predictive. Hey, the last 10 weeks, you've ordered 10 items of X, let's pre-populate your cart, your quote for, with that includes that information, or has something changed, and tying it into purchase demand, right? There's suddenly all this information that's available, around how your business operates that can inform and make effectively recommendations that are useful in a B2B context, given sort of your long-standing relationship with a customer, right? Right. And so I think that actually, represents a really interesting opportunity to accelerate some of this sort of purchasing that happens in B2B workflows, and selling processes based on automation and understanding, because suddenly now all this data is available to make recommendations to you based on sort of the transaction volume you have, the businesses you're making, the way your business is performing at any given time. So I think those are areas that are really interesting, sort of applying this predictive intelligence from an account, recurring engagements with a existing customer. They get really interesting at B2B.
And the next question I got, which is the bread and butter, is about the critical role of structured product data. And it's always made me laugh that every now and then we need a reminder for people to take data seriously and improve the data integrity and clean out the mess that they've allowed, the debt, as with technical debt, the product data debt. And structured product data, and you've written about this a lot. You posted on LinkedIn. I know Elastic Path talks about this, and it's a core capability of your product. But I want to get into two areas. Number one is about the data and what it means to B2B businesses. And the second bit then come back on to your solution and where you're going technically and what tools you're building now to support in this. So let's start on the data. And to give people a context, you posted on LinkedIn very recently about issues with Amazon's Buy For Me, agent running errors with products due to product data issues. Do you want to give a bit of flavor of what's happened, what the causes are, and then what actually B2B businesses need to do in order to be ready for this style of answer-led discovery?
Sure. So I think, one of the challenges here is, the nature of the information that you need to deliver, to any discovery experience is evolving quickly, right? And today, what happens is it's so easy for, whether it be a search index or an LLM to sort of see a little bit of information about you and sort of make a bunch of assumptions about your product. And this is kind of what happened with the Amazon situation, is they have incomplete product data about the products themselves. They don't have inventory data. And so they're selling things that are out of stock. And sort of making all of these assumptions because they sort of have a tiny bit of knowledge. But in this sort of answer-led discovery world, in effect, you need an 80-page PDF for each of your products worth of data. So to ensure that the answer engine knows when to recommend your products, when to return your products based on a prompt. And I think that's the big piece. Like in a content product data syndication model through things like, PIMS and what have you out to the market, there's way too much information for a marketplace or search engine to consume, right? You're not going to push that through your Google Merchant Center. You're constrained in how much information they can take in. And so that leads, even when you have it set up effectively, there's only so much you can share. But what you end up doing is, you operate within the constraints and you leave all this other information that's relevant out. And I think the opportunity, particularly in B2B, is by definition, these products are more complex. They have more information required, interdependencies, how products go together, compatibility, all sorts of elements like this, regional differences, those are things that aren't able to be well handled in sort of traditional sort of SEO and search-led processes that I think creates a new opportunity in an LLM world to manage. Plus, I do think, we've always see our personal behaviors and sort of bleed into our professional behaviors. And as people get, more and more comfortable writing prompts and querying answer engines for how to find things, they're going to want to apply that in B2B use cases. And so I think the opportunity here is, how do you best represent the important details of your products in as much depth as you can to the LLMs, so that way, it can behave the way it's designed to behave, which is to make predictions about what the next best word is in a structure, right? And sort of complete the sentence, if you will. And that, I think that has a potential to work exceptionally well in B2B in the same way it works exceptionally well in software programming.
And I'm keen to explore a bit about where you've gone technically in the product on this, because you've got AI optimized product experience manager feeds, and you've basically got the structure there to allow merchants to create LLM ready product catalog, pricing, etc., to push into engines like ChatGPT, Perplexity. Do you want to talk us through both those solutions? What do they do? What do they enable for merchants? And also, I guess for people listening, like, well, what work does the merchant need to do beyond putting the source data in, or is all of the connectivity automatically enabled out the box?
So, a couple of things that we've done. So first, our product experience manager, we made this decision years ago before this answer-led discovery was even a process for us. But effectively what we did is we decoupled the traditional product catalog in an e-commerce system into separate discrete services. And what that opens up is sort of all these combinatorial opportunities and all this flexibility to add information, whether, so we support 10,000 variations on a particular product, which, doesn't matter in shoes per se, but it might matter in machine parts. And the ability to configure and assemble those together in pre-described combinations becomes really important. And you can combine that with pricing and inventory. So our what it has done is made our catalog information model, data model, really, really flexible. Then, a couple of years ago, we added a capability called commerce extensions, which we can really think of, frankly, as databases as a service. So you can store any type of information. So now that is, again, it explodes the amount of information that you can store around your products, to typically inform workflows or processes, recommendation engines, and now can go and work exceptionally well and well suited for LLMs. And so this combination of a very elastic, pun intended, catalog structure, product data model that allows you to capture tons of information, is at the core of this. And we built all this before, so the LLMs were a thing. So, good on us, if you will. And now we've made it so that way you can, all your product data is already structured for consumption by OpenAI's product feeds or for Perplexity engines. And so really all the merchant needs to do is to point those product information feeds to ChatGPT and Perplexity. And there's a well-documented sort of handshake process for that. And now the LLM knows where to get the structured information. And the nice thing is we tied it into our catalog Delta features. So every time you make an update, you don't republish all the information in the catalog. You just publish the Delta changes. And so that same process works with the LLM. So you're giving much smaller bits of information, delivering it to the LLMs, which is obviously much more consumable on their part. So you have the one-time process of all the information goes up, and then you're just sending deltas from there on out, which makes it much easier to ingest over time.
Yeah, that is very nice. The pain of having to republish or re-export in bulk every time should be a thing. Not.
Exactly. Right. And that's resource and time intensive for both us and for the merchant. So that, so we've taken that problem off the table. The other thing that we've built into this is we have a whole sort of rule structure on our catalogs, right? And this is really important in B2B because it determines who gets shown what products, what pricings based on what attributes, and you can assign all that based on accounts. And so that gives you really tight-grained granularity over who sees what information, in what context they see that. And all of that sort of is performed automatically in the background. We're still working through how do you take advantage of that in some form or another, or do you in a sort of LLM scenario? But, I think this is a rapidly evolving market. And so some of the nuances around how businesses really operate, we're still exploring in conjunction with our customers.
Yeah, do you know what I had a question that popped into my head when I was prepping for this, and that was exactly it. Is there is some content that is hidden based on specific account credentials. Pricing is a classic one, but there's also additional information that's only relevant to certain customers that isn't made mass market, and it's got commercial sensitivity. So I guess in my understanding from what you said about the structure of your catalogs, where you have all the different components, so that not all have to be published, I guess you can store account specific and commercially sensitive data and not expose it publicly, right? So LLM
exactly right.
doesn't have to consume what it shouldn't be consuming.
Yeah, exactly. Right through authentication models and account ID, account controls, as well as through our catalog rules, you can designate very specifically which information, in this case, you'd share with an LLM for discovery purposes versus which is only available to, customer cohort 1 versus cohort 2.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The question that most people, when they listen into podcasts, have is, this makes sense. I understand what this means to business. What do I do about this? So, and I know that you've Elastic Path's prepared like its view on what a practical playbook for B2B brands preparing for 2026 is, like a 3-step readiness plan. Do you want to talk us through what you think these B2B businesses and the e-com teams should be doing?
Great question. I think that, I think it is very much in line with our conversation here. I think, the first is get an understanding, if we just take the answer-led discovery process, is what percentage of information or traffic and develop a hypothesis on how much of that is coming from answer engines. This is a conversation we're asking customers all the time. Across all use cases is, how are you seeing your traffic dynamics change? And it's a little bit different in B2B, and it's going to be slower. But there's increasingly, I think you're going to see that in general in the discovery of your information, of your company and your product suite and the problems that you solve. Then I think once you feel like you figure out where the sort of tipping point is like, hey, we need to really be here. Then I think the second question is how well suited is our data for sharing out to LLMs? And it's really sort of a data analysis, product data analysis exercise to, I think one of the questions I would encourage people to ask is, what are the constraints that our existing systems, be it our ERP system, our commerce system, our PIM, put on the amount of information and the types of information that we have, and what additional information sources or content data pieces would be valuable to improve the discovery, the understanding, and the relevance of our products. Because I think clearly, we see this a lot because in B2B, we predominantly see homegrown systems, but the nature of the beast, if you will, is there's always constraints on there, right? And so there's things that are left out of the system that are, in marketing collateral, in salespeople's heads, in training information, training guides, what have you, in support, manuals or FAQs somewhere outside the context of the buying experience, that are supporting the product. Well, now suddenly you have, how could we add that in to inform the discoverability of our products in this sort of new answer-led model? And then from there, then the question is what's the best way and the most cost-efficient way to push this information into the LLMs, right? And I think, our value proposition is we can, very quickly do a catalog modeling exercise. And then all of our data is already enabled for consumption by LLMs. So you don't have to do any extra work to structure your data for consumption by these discovery-led engines. And we have a whole guide on how we do this in our documentation site around how to provide your product feeds into the OpenAI product feed.
One of the notes I've got here, which I think is really, really smart idea, and I'd love to hear a bit more about how people do this or what you've used it for, is about internal small tests to help you gauge readiness for submission, using like small co-pilot agents, for example, to run some simple questions to see what sort of information's coming back. Is it pulling in relevant information? Does the data come back in a structured enough way? Do you want to talk us through that? Because I think that sounds like a really good practical way for people to start experimenting and testing the quality of their data.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think the easiest way to do it is we all sit in front of our machines all day, is start querying your products in ChatGPT and in Perplexity, right? And I do this for our customers. It's funny. I said to myself, I'm going to do all my Christmas and holiday shopping on ChatGPT. And you very quickly start to see where the sharp edges are, around whether it's, you're actively in a purchase process or you're evaluating the efficacy of your current, data that's in there. How can you better, structure that information? So I think, and this has been a big, certainly a big theme of mine over the last year, is the only way we're going to get better at understanding how to use AI is by using AI, right? And all the unlock moments are there. I think on the product side, our organization, we're participating in the Mock Alliance AI initiatives. And so we've been doing a lot, working with hackathons that they've done to understand how to best, structure information for consumption by LLMs. And then running tests like, hey, is it actually working? Are we seeing the results that we expect? I think one of the questions and challenges is the LLMs, sort of have specific training schedules. And so we know that they consume information and get better with inferencing. But I think that's the key thing is it's unclear what the lag looks like, how much you push information and how long before that shows up in the LLM results. But we've been doing a lot of testing, to as we're building the product, say, hey, does it deliver? Is the information showing up? And I think, we're starting to see a lot of investment in, sort of, AEO or GEO tooling in the same way we saw with SEO to provide you some sort of, qualitative assessment of your data information. And one of the things that we've been working towards building is product content, like evaluation, AI evaluation tool right inside PXM. So that way, we're providing you assessments on, there's easy stuff where you're missing data, and where the gaps are, but also, starting to get better into sort of qualitative and, measures around data structure and what have you, and data content quality. So that way, you understand, immediately how well suited your information is for consumption in the LLM. So I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I think, we're excited and certainly it aligns really well with our sort of engineering philosophy is, start small and experiment and learn along the way.
Yeah. And, I think you're 100% right about, I would urge any businesses out there who haven't started playing around or aren't doing much to use it more and more just to understand how it works in principle and see where information gaps go. I mean, I've done it myself for my own consultancy. I want to know, do I get visible for key things about who are the recommended independent e-com consultants in the UK? Who are the top re-platforming? Mm-hmm. And you know what I have learned very quickly is if you keep challenging, saying, I had it on a couple of queries that I should be found for because I'm top in Google on. And I was like, why didn't you consider Digital Juggler? Why not? Did you know that X? And I now when I check, and I've done it through like hidden IPs as well, so it's not just on my machine, so they're not detecting me spamming it all the time. But I'm now included in answer results that I wasn't before because I'm suggesting, and then it's gone off and looked at my website. It's crawled it. I found the info and gone, oh, okay, you're now in my consideration set. So actually, I think the time to response of updating is. And I know that in some ways is slightly concerning because it could also use crap information. But
sure, yeah. No, that's a great thing to hear. And one of the things, and this is very much sort of an inside baseball thing, is you look at sort of traditional enterprise software companies like us. The gatekeeper on that type of recommendation has always been the analyst firms. Right. And there's a whole game you play to score effectively in the analyst firms. And so now, we've seen this is the democratization of that sort of gatekeeper piece is happening in real time in LLMs all the time. And so we do very similar things to in some ways to trigger the machine to go learn more about specific areas. So that's very useful.
Yeah,
And it's in some ways it actually changes like some of our marketing tactics because of the things that we know the LLMs want to see. They want to see things like press releases and G2 reviews and what have you. And so you go and work on those. And so I think that applies to every business, B2B or B2C.
Yeah, exactly. The credible external sources, in the same way that Google's link graph has been incredibly important, and an credible external, not just volume of links like it used to be in the Wild West days of link files, but now credible authoritative links from reputable domains still is one of the strongest signals. And increasingly, like it's like do your foundations right, essentially. So the next question I've got is around the classic crystal ball things. You specialize in B2B, and you work with some complex B2B businesses as well. What is your broader 2026 commerce predictions angle from a B2B? And linked to that, what do you think will be the biggest surprise in terms of like B2B trends for this year?
That's a good question. I think the couple of things. Certainly one is I think answer engines have the opportunity to become sort of the new product detail page, right? And so, as we've been talking about all throughout this this discussion, that product information that populates the details around your products is going to be critical in the answer engine, right? Because that's where people are going to find and learn information, right? So that becomes commerce has always been sort of a multi-channel thing. Yet that's another product detail page that we have to think about from in a B2B commerce piece. I do think that AI sort of, as we, compresses the funnel from discovery, comparison, configuration can all happen much, much faster and maybe in one or two steps. Whereas today, those are, much more elongated, right? Because answer engines aren't, putting in a query, then hitting the filter and narrowing the results and, and all the sort of manual things that we do today. They're processing the information and doing that on the fly. I think, in general, I think marketplaces, this really has a potential to disrupt sort of traditional marketplaces, whether they be B2C marketplaces or B2B, because I think AI has the potential to shift loyalty away from channels to outcomes, right? And in some ways disrupt the transaction. I mean, one of my big predictions, and maybe this is more B2C, is the problem that the open AIs of the world have is they need $50 billion revenue opportunities, and there's just not that many in the world. But taking the transaction and taking a cut of that is a huge opportunity. And I think we're going to see more of that in the short term, rather than, in addition to likely sort of traditional ad models, which just turn AI into television. But I think that the interesting opportunity here, and maybe the biggest surprise, is there's an opportunity for B2B to really lead the adoption curve of AI in digital commerce, because the complexity and nature of their products are well suited to the types of outcomes and responses that LLMs are really well suited to deliver, and well suited to understand. And they're, as we talked about with quotations and other pieces, there's a ton of workflow elements in the B2B buying process that are ripe for automation with AI. And so I think those two elements really say to me that B2B can play a strong role in leading the practical adoption of AI in the digital commerce world for sure.
Interesting. Paul and myself recently did our general, not B2B specific trends of 2026, and I'm looking forward to going back in 6 months and seeing what we were actually talking sense on and what we're talking nonsense on. It's always fun, isn't it? Look, Bryan, I really appreciate you coming on. I know you're very busy. Always a pleasure to hear what you're up to and also your perspective on the market. For anyone listening who wants to learn more about Elastic Path, the product capabilities and the B2B solutions, Bryan's contact details are on the landing page, as is a link to the Elastic Path website where you can submit inquiries. Thanks for joining us today.
James, really thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
And thanks as always, everyone, for listening. Keep your ears peeled for next week's episode. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.